Hey, Janice.
Hey, Anthony.
Today, let's talk about some unexpected notary headaches in probate. So, most people, I think, have the impression that getting a document notarized is, kind of a piece of cake, which is in many cases true. You just go to a bank or a pharmacy or, even a Staples, I think they have notaries, right?
Yeah.
So, it sounds easy enough, but in probate in particular, that's kind of not the case.
Not so much. So today we will discuss how originals are required, going to the U.S. Embassy, and then what the heck is an apostille or apostille, as it's sometimes said.
Very good. Very good. Okay. So let's talk about originals required. So in New York, at least, the probate courts, most of the probate courts still require originals. So the reason, the way this makes things complicated is, most of the rest of the world, you can do scans or faxes even. I mean, even faxes is old fashioned, right? But you can do scans and PDFs. Yeah, right? But the courts, no. They want to see the original blue ink, preferably not black, so they can tell if it's, if it's a photocopy or not. And they want to see the notary stamp or seal or, foil little certificate thing, depending on what state you're from or Commonwealth.
And I think that's every state. I don't know many states that allow you to get away with the copy.
Well, I think in the federal courts and in normal litigation, right, there's a lot of e-filing now, electronic filing, where you can just submit the scan version with an attorney affidavit that, yes, these are the originals, kind of to prove that they are originals. But for whatever reason, at least in New York, the surrogates courts are kind of a couple steps behind. There are a few counties that do that, but the vast majority of the counties, you need to walk in the original documents and sit down across the desk from a clerk and kind of have a conversation and go over it. There's also, so we recently had a client ask about this interesting service called notarize.com. So this seems like a really natural, technological progress kind of situation where...
Sure, it sounds promising.
Yeah, it's a website that offers a service where you can get onto like a video chat, I think it is, almost like a Skype, and with a notary, and the notary will witness you signing the document. So basically, it's a notarization without having to be physically present, which a lot of, what we do these days, whether it's YouTube or FaceTime or I think TikTok or whatever, is like that, right? And it seems to make sense because the notary is witnessing the signature and so forth. But the drawback of that service is the resulting document is that the result is that the notary will sort of give you an electronic stamp on your document.
Correct.
Right? And we haven't tested this yet. And, with the court, it's kind of you got to try it and see. But because we had an important case and we didn't want to sort of test the waters there, we went old school. So we haven't been able to test this yet. We don't know if the courts will accept it, but basically my guess is probably not. I mean, if there's something
Maybe
new,
not yet.
Yeah, give it 5 years.
Maybe, yeah. Hopefully it would be definitely nice, but I don't know.
Yeah, so 2025, maybe the courts will catch up to that.
We'll report back.
Right?
Right.
But I mean, it's a good service. I think for most other walks of life or most other situations where you need a notary, that'll be great. But I don't think it'll work here in probate.
It'll be interesting. Maybe somebody's actually come across that. They could share some of their
throw
thoughts
that in the comments.
That'd be interesting to see if it was rejected or accepted or.
Okay, so the next major situation, and we get a lot of international estates, meaning somebody died in New York or somebody died abroad and had New York U.S. assets. And we have a lot of heirs or family members or people who are involved who do not live in the States. So what that means is they need to get a U.S. notary. And one way of doing that is going to the U.S. Embassy, right? Is it the embassy or consulate? I get those two things confused.
I think it's the consulate.
Okay. And the consulate is within the embassy, correct?
I think so, yes. Either way, you're still going to the embassy.
Gotcha.
Correct.
So like the embassy is the building and the consulate is the one who does services for U.S. citizens or something like that.
That's my understanding.
Oh, very good. So the reason this is problematic or can be problematic is, number one, you might not live near an embassy. So let's say you're in the countryside of the idyllic countryside of England, and getting to London is just a huge pain for you, right?
Could be hours, like hours and hours to get there.
Yeah, we had a family in Panama where the embassy and consulate were in I think what is it, Panama City, the capital, but they lived basically all the way to the west by the coast or the border with Costa Rica. So it was like this 8-hour, unpaved road, like this journey to get to the embassy. And the lady in this particular case was in her 80s, and it's just not in that trip could have killed her pretty much,
much. Right,
Yeah.
right. That's too much. That's way too much.
So in that situation, we were lucky. We were able to find a traveling consulate, meaning that particular U.S. embassy offered a service where you could pay a member of the consulate to travel outwards, and it was expensive, but
I was going to say, my guess is that was not cheap.
It was not, but it was better than putting this lady's life at risk.
Correct. With an 8-hour unpaved journey.
Yeah.
Right.
So there are solutions, but none of them, they're not always great. And even if you are proximate, even if you do live near or it's close enough to get to the embassy, a lot of them have just these long, ridiculous lines. Like it's almost like that stereotypical image of what is it, Ellis Island in the 1900s? Like trying to the unwashed masses trying to get through.
Trying to get through, or even going to the DMV, you see the line is miles long to get through.
No, because you're usually stuck online. You're stuck online with everyone who's doing everything from an asylum request to a visa renewal to anyone who needs U.S. services is on that line with you. It's not just a whole long line of people who need a notarization, right? So you could be in this.
So now you've traveled 8 hours to stand in line for a few more hours.
And then on top of that, a lot of embassies and consulates, they do it by appointment only. And I think it was London. We had a client where appointments, like the next soonest appointment was 3 or 4 weeks out. So it's like a 5-star restaurant table or something. It's just really hard to get an appointment.
Exclusive, yes.
Yeah. I was a little surprised by that. I thought a major metropolis would be a little bit more fluid in its appointments, but maybe they're just busier because they're a major metropolis. But whatever the case, yeah.
But coming from the consumer, though, if you told me I had to wait 2 weeks to schedule versus coming to stand in a line for a few hours, I'd probably opt. But we both know sometimes we got to move forward with this stuff.
Well, yeah, it is
right?
Good to know that option exists and that, you won't be standing online for 8 hours if you have an appointment, hopefully. But yeah, I mean, the probate process needs to move forward, and, the rest of the family has signed and is waiting for you. And you're
waiting on one signature.
Exactly.
Right?
So there's that. And again, remember, the topic of this conversation is unexpected notary headaches. And yeah, just that delay could be a headache for everyone. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So next, still in the area of international estates, we have an alternative in many countries, an alternative to going to a U.S. embassy or consulate, and it's called the Apostille. And I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I think I am. But
I think that's the tomato thing. I think some say Apostille and then you say Apostille. I think the way you say it sounds better. So
I mean, yeah, it sounds fancy. So that's what I'm going to stick with.
It does. That sounds way fancier.
So Apostille, what is that? It's basically, okay, so there's I don't know how boring I want to get here, but there's an international treaty called the Hague Convention, and any country that's part of this treaty can participate in Apostille. And what that means is, let's use the US and Canada, for example, just because I know those two are participants.
Yes.
If we have a client in Canada who, just for whatever reason, can't get a US notarization, what they can do is they can have the document notarized by a Canadian notary, step 1, and then step 2, have that Canadian notarized document sort of re-notarized or re-verified by an international notary called an apostille. So it's almost like a double notarization, one at the local level.
It essentially is, right?
Yeah.
It's like you're notarizing the notarizer
Correct.
Of the signature. Correct.
And what that apostille guy or dude is saying is that this Canadian notarization conforms with or meets the standards of this international convention and should now be acceptable in any of the other countries that is part of the Hague Convention, including the U.S. So that's a way to sort of normalize your domestic notary for any other country within this treaty. So that sounds like, oh yeah, gravy or cake. That's the solution. That's what we're going to do. The drawback is that, number one, it's not that easy to find somebody who does this. You usually have to find an attorney, or in some places you have to go to the county clerk. That's how we do it in the States, at least. Yeah. And it's expensive. So, for example, there's a service that I just looked up online on Google, and it's $195 per document. So, I mean, in the States at least, in New York at least, a notarization at most is, I think, $3.
Yeah, right. So
yeah. Yeah. And by the way, probate often includes...
But it's expensive, but... Oh, sorry.
No, please, go ahead.
I was going to say, it is expensive, but there's really no way around it. You have to have it in order to, what are you going to do? I know it might be a little bit cheaper in the States if you go there yourself to the court, but how many people can walk into the court and get that kind of thing done?
And that's per document. So if you're an heir and all you need is to, sign a form to get your inheritance, that might be whatever, fine. But if you're somebody who's kind of involved, maybe the executor or a co-executor, you're going to be signing a lot of documents. And if it's at $200 per pop, that's going to add up real quick.
Really quickly, yes.
So you might want to even just fly to the States for, a bunch of signatures. I don't know. I'm just joking. That probably doesn't make sense, but...
Well, I guess if you add it up, depending on how many documents, but...
Okay, so I think that's all we have, Janice.
Absolutely. And so we just touched on all of this, but if you want to learn more, check out the How Probate Works book by Anthony, and it's available on Amazon.
Cool. All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Janice, thanks for joining me on this one, and we'll talk again next time.
We'll talk soon.
Take care.